all, and welcome to day 2 of the 2021 We Give Summit. My name is Jeannie Sager, and I have the amazing privilege of moderating what I know will be an engaging and energizing panel discussion. Now, most days you will find me serving as director for the Women's Philanthropy Institute, which is housed at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. At WPI, we conduct, curate, and disseminate rigorous research around gender and philanthropy. And we believe that understanding how gender influences giving will ultimately drive more giving by all. One of our research threads over the last decade has been around collective giving and giving circles. And as all of you know, giving circles are a force to be reckoned with in philanthropy. Our latest study on giving circles was the first landscape scan in 10 years. The study found that the number of giving circles in the United States tripled in 10 years from 2007 to 2017. They have allocated almost $1.3 billion to local communities over the past 35 years. And while women are still a majority of giving circle members, there is a growth in the diversity of the ecosystem with LGBTQ+, men only, Jewish, African American, Asian American, and Latinx groups forming and growing daily thanks to the work of Philanthropy Together. Giving circles allow women and all members to step fully into leadership roles, learn about their communities, and engage deeply with nonprofits, and in some cases, influence public policy. A study that examined women giving circle members showed that these women tap their social networks more strategically for philanthropic advice, and their philanthropic networks are more diverse in terms of age, income, and race. Furthermore, the study affirmed that giving circle members give more strategically and proactively, give to a wider array of organizations and causes, and are more likely to engage in civic activity. When we think about what's the next evolution for giving circles and collective giving, there is the notion of challenging what some call the nonprofit industrial complex, which is largely seen as donors on one side, nonprofit industry on the other. Giving circles can provide a different option, an alternative to institutional philanthropy. One example of this challenge is the growing adoption by giving circles of trust-based philanthropy, which is characterized by a pledge that commits to loosening or eliminating restrictions on current grants, making new grants as unrestricted as possible, reducing what is asked of our nonprofit partners, contributing to community-based emergency response funds, and committing to listening to those communities least heard. A second example involves efforts by giving circles to affect and champion systemic change. The Women's Giving Alliance in Jacksonville, Florida has invested $6.5 million since 2001 to improve the lives of women and girls, and established an endowment that has grown to more than $3.5 million. In 2011, it launched its first 3-year strategy to allocate awards in the single focused area of mental health, then later adopted a second focus area, breaking the cycle of female poverty, and moved to the forefront of convening local organizations and individuals around that issue, forming a coalition called Lift Jacksonville. This effort led alliance members to advocate in the Florida State Capitol for a new law that banned marriage for children under age 17. And today, the We Give Summit has gathered 4 more examples of how giving circles are addressing some of our most contemporary challenges in new, innovative, inclusive, and collective ways. But before I turn this over to the panel for introductions, I want to leave all of you with a quote from Lynetta Gilbert, a respected leader in the philanthropic field, who asks the following questions. As giving circles, are we thinking big enough? Are we trying to look and sound and be like institutional philanthropy? Are we allowing ourselves the freedom to be and act and talk as we believe we need and want to be, to connect, support, advocate, for our community through our time, talent, treasure, and testimony. And with those questions in mind, let's meet some extraordinary humans who are answering these questions each and every day as they work to achieve the common good. So let me start with you, Shan, who leads the Giving Project Network.
Good morning, Jeanine. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. It's so great to be here today with you all. My name is Shannon Fuylon. I'm the co-director of the Giving Project Network. We are a network of 10 social justice funds across the United States that use the Giving Project model. The Giving Project model is a 6-month program that combines political education on race, class, and philanthropy, combined with grassroots fundraising, participatory grant making, to move money to social justice organizing that's led by Black, Indigenous, and working class people of color. Our work through Giving Project specifically funds systemic change work that's led by people who are most impacted by systems of racial capitalism, patriarchy, and other systems of oppression. And my background is in community organizing, specifically around issues of racial justice and economic justice. And I've worked on national campaigns to end racial profiling, to end mass incarceration, and to build community wealth through worker-owned cooperatives. So I see the Giving Project, our particular model that we use, as a tool for developing leadership, to develop capacity for cross-race and cross-class collective action, where communities are learning to govern and move resources to meet community needs. So really happy to be on the panel with you all today. Thanks, Jeannie.
Jan, thank you so much for joining us today. Very excited for our audience to learn more about the Giving Project and all of the innovations that your group has led for many years. So I'm going to move to Minda. Would you please share with us your work about the $1,000 project or 1K project, or share how you call it?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. We call it the 1K project. And I co-founded it last year with a fellow investor as we saw the impact of the pandemic really hit people as they lost income due to the pandemic. And so this is a response to that. And the way I describe our effort is as a volunteer collective. And what we did is we created a matching program for families who were in need due to the pandemic, and sponsors who were willing to give them $1,000 a month for 3 months, hence the 1K project. And then what we did that's a little bit unique is we built a trust network for family referrals and facilitated an anonymized direct cash giving through GoFundMe. So we sprung up, and our objective was to be fast. And so our innovations really sort of flowed from that mandate that we followed. So I'll share more about that later, but just in terms of who I am, I'm, really not full-time in the nonprofit space. This is something that I was pulled into, but I've always been an active community organizer in other ways. It's just that those skills sort of just came to bear in this extraordinary moment. So I'm a venture investor of tech startups in the very earliest stages. So innovation and new models and acting quickly sort of came naturally to myself and the group of people that formed around the 1K project.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Minda, for sharing a little bit more about your background. I think that's very intriguing for people to understand how to use all of their resources and talents in this work. I'm going to move now to Colleen with the Battery San Francisco.
Thank you so much. It is really an honor to be here today with these extraordinary women. I feel very touched to have been invited to be amongst you all. I'm Colleen Gregerson. I'm the Executive Director of Battery Powered. Battery Powered is a giving circle that's integrated within a social club. So the Battery is a social club that's based here in San Francisco, and members of that club can opt into our giving circle called Battery Powered. We have about 500 members who do participate in our giving circle, and that means that collectively we have about $4 million a year to give away. So we're a fairly sizable group. One of the things that I think is unique about us, besides being integrated into a social club, is that we are not issue specific. Our mission is quite literally 2 words. It is activate generosity. And that means that we will take on all kinds of issues, and those are driven by our members themselves who select 3 issues a year that they want to focus on. So that means we really cover a great diversity of topics, from climate action to homelessness, childhood nutrition to gun violence prevention. And we get a chance to really learn deeply about those issues. One of our core values is that we want to become more informed citizens on these topics before we start giving funding away. And so our timeline is perhaps a bit slower than some others. We spend about 4 months deeply learning about the issues before we make our grant decisions. It does mean we have a lot of fun along the way with expert nights and book clubs and documentary viewings and volunteer days. But at the end of our 4-month cycle, we do about $1 million to $1.5 million of grants to several organizations on each of those themes. So excited to talk to you more about that today. My personal background is that this is the first time that I've been in a position to help give money away. I've always been on the other side of the equation, working in nonprofits and asking for the money to then go and do the work on the ground. But that experience of understanding and working with donors who really allowed us to have flexibility and achieve our impact, and others who didn't, were more restrictive, that has really informed our own practices in battery power now so that we can be the best funders that we can.
Thank you so much for that. And I think there are a lot of people in the nonprofit world who would tell you that $1 million in 4 months is pretty fast. So you can think it might be a little bit slower than some other giving circles, but I think the diversity in our ecosystem would challenge that. But thank you so much, Colleen, for sharing more about that, and we're looking forward to learning more. And so we will round out this great lineup of introductions with Shaunda of Black Girl Ventures.
Hi, everyone. So grateful to be here. So grateful to be holding space on this stage with everyone. Thank you so much. So a bit about Black Girl Ventures. It was founded by Shelly Bell, our fearless CEO and leader, in 2016 in a response to the news that less than 1% of Black women founders receive access to venture capital. So at BGV, our mission is to create low barrier access to capital, capacity, and my favorite part, community for Black and Brown women identifying founders. Our signature programming that we started off with in 2016 is what we call our BGV Pitch. Is an initiative supporting Black and Brown women entrepreneurs through crowdfunded pitch competitions. So thank Shark Tank for all my fans out there, meets Kickstarter Live, now virtual. It was actually modeled after historic Harlem rent parties. The events offer a creative way to raise funds and build community for Black and Brown women entrepreneurs. So we have more innovative programming and deeper programming that I'll share with everyone during the course of this call. But I'm super excited to be here. I am the COO of Black Girl Ventures. I actually started off as a volunteer about 3 years ago as at Black Girl Ventures. And I actually come from a for-profit space. My background is in marketing and branding and operations. But I started to develop a really affinity towards people that look like me and wanted to create space and use my expertise to help entrepreneurs. So I started off with just doing consulting work for marketing and operations and for branding for various entrepreneurs. And it has grown to like, I'm here full time. So it's been an amazing journey. I'm so happy to be here. And I'm so happy that we've been impacting these Black and Brown women entrepreneurs across the nation, hopefully globally. So again, thank you guys so much for letting me be here. And I'm excited to dig into this conversation.
Yes, thank you, Shaunda. I think we all are. I want to remind our audience to please feel free to throw questions into the Q&A or chat. I see a comment actually in the Q&A, and so I'm going to ask my colleague Kyson at We Give Summit. The request is, as questions come in to the Q&A side, if you could place those in the chat so everyone can see them and we can track them in that way. So I'll ask Kyson to take that task on for us. And we'll just jump into this conversation. By first allowing me to thank all of you for this truly inspiring work that all of you are doing. I'm so excited to talk about the synergies that exist in your collective experiences. And so I'm going to start with this notion of innovation. I'll start with Minda. So share a little bit more, as you kind of alluded to in your introduction, about how are you innovating, and what are you in particular pushing on in your work or your model at the 1K Project to kind of upend standard philanthropy?
Absolutely, yes. When we came together, it was really about how can we act quickly as individuals to help families affected by the pandemic, because large institutions and government weren't able to move fast enough. So we realized that as the power of individuals is that we can move quickly without bureaucracy. And so we really embraced that. And we did that in a couple of ways. One was that we knew that we wanted to make direct giving connections from one person to another, but we needed a way to architect that in a responsible, anonymized way. And so we set about working on that while we also just started doing it. So we sort of built the program as we were giving funds away. So day one of our project was, really quickly was finding a family that we could fund and funding them. And so it enabled us to iterate and learn. And one of the things that we learned was that we could move more quickly if we eliminated traditional sort of identification bureaucracy in our application process by building a trusted network for referrals of families. And that we could really quickly diversify throughout the country by doing this as well. And in finding those sort of nonprofits and principals and teachers and organizations that were in touch with these families, business owners, we were able to really rapidly spread out and create this trusted network of referrals that became a flywheel of a way for us to attract more sponsors, to attract more trusted network participants, to attract more families. And so we used a lot of social media to do that. So that was another part of moving fast, is creating an organization that could expand organically. And the other part was that we wanted to move fast, but we wanted to move with knowing that we were making money transfer happen. It was also really important to us to try and use existing infrastructure as much as possible. So we used GoFundMe as the mechanism for the money transfer between those two parties. And that gave a lot of trust and confidence from our sponsors, who were giving $3,000 to a person they didn't know, but trusted that we had brought them into our through our application process. But it also gave them a chance to be confident that GoFundMe's process for making the distributions happen was in keeping with law and all the legal and regulatory aspects of receiving funds that way. So in order to move fast, we had to do certain things really well, but we also set in motion some systems, I think, that allowed us to expand organically much faster than just the small group of individuals that were working on the project.
Thanks, Minda. The Women's Philanthropy Institute did an early report on giving during the early months of COVID-19, and really found that this dichotomy between indirect and direct giving, and this real growth in this direct giving and trying to find the families to help, right? So being able to identify, and then also to be able to trust, again, the mechanism. So there's some great research and work being done around crowdfunding in particular, and how that's growing and how it's kind of helping lift up again the mutual aid work that has always existed in
exactly.
our country.
We felt like what we were doing was scaling the idea that's always been in practice of individuals helping each other. And we were just using technology and a protocol to just scale the idea that you wanted to help, but you didn't know how to find the right person and you didn't know how to trust that. And yeah, so there was definitely an interesting exploration that went on as we talked to different donors who were very interested in giving us substantial amounts of money because of this direct giving. So it really, I think, goes along with the idea that people really want to make the impact of their choosing. And giving them the option to choose a specific person was very powerful.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Minda. Shan, so it's kind of shifting from kind of innovation that grew out of this response to the pandemic to work that you've been doing that's been ongoing, right? So share a little bit about innovation with regards to the Giving Project Network and how your model in particular is really pushing against what I call that nonprofit industrial complex.
Yeah, thanks. So like you said, the Giving Project model has been operating for about 10 years. It originated at the Social Justice Funds Northwest as a community foundation that was really focused on social justice, finding that after the 2008 recession, they were really struggling to retain donors, to bring in new donors. And they tried this program that kind of combined a lot of the best practices in the field in movement building and organizing, and combining that with donor education and donor organizing to raise significant amounts of money. And they found that it worked. And they started then a few years later sharing that model with other social justice funds and foundations around the country that were interested in a model of change, not charity. So looking at funding systemic change work. And I think for us, we're always innovating on how we implement the model, what facilitation looks like, how we make sure that we're accountable to movements that are constantly changing with new demands, with new targets, different kinds of work, and what that looks like locally. But I think one of the things that's really critical about our model is the political education piece. And that means that we, as practitioners of this model, of the Giving Project model, are constantly innovating to more deeply understand the systems we want to change, and particularly the systemic relationship between race and class. And so I wanted to share a quote from Martin Luther King, where he says, "Philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which make philanthropy necessary." And I actually want to adapt that to say which make philanthropy possible, because philanthropy really only is possible because of an economic system that creates extreme income and wealth inequality in the United States and across the world. And the system that some people call racial monopoly capitalism, we all know this, right? But I think to really let it sink in that this system developed through the forced enslavement of African people, through the possession and privatization and extraction of land and natural resources, the attempted genocide of Native American people who lived on that land. And traditional philanthropy really emerged from that system, from wealthy capitalists making money off industries that were often harming the environment, often killing people to take over land to make those industries possible. And then after amassing huge amounts of capital and huge amounts of wealth, giving small amounts of that away. We look at some early examples of, I believe it's Carnegie and some of the mining projects that a lot of that wealth came from. The first philanthropy projects were about undermining the power of labor and the power of the workers to actually demand safe working conditions and more pay by setting up food pantries or other kind of services that were, kind of would undermine their demands and meet some of their basic needs without meeting the demands around power, right, around control of working conditions. And so we have to look at this history. And one of the things that's so beautiful about the Giving Project is inviting individual participants to be part of a collective, to take responsibility for understanding how we've been shaped by these systems, and also that we can take action individually and together to build different kinds of relationships, to be able to build a different kind of system. And so where traditional philanthropy adopts some of those logics of private ownership, of individual choice, those kinds of things, that we're really trying to create enough community and trust in a cross-race, cross-class group to ask those questions, to have those conversations where people are considering what would it look like to move from individual choice to being an individual within a collective and being accountable to that collective, to belonging, having a sense of belonging in that group, from moving from transactional relationships of money to something that's transformative, that's healing, that's in deep relationship with people in your community, in your family, in your the place you live. And finally, to really move from private control of resources to community control, to democratic decision making around resources, and from moving from kind of power over others through kind of the charity models is sometimes like, we have more power, we're going to be nice and be generous and give you something, but we still have the power. And so moving from that into relationships of reciprocity and mutual accountability. And so I think that's how we do that, right? It's like a whole nother question. I think that's what we're constantly innovating. How does that look in real life? How does that look in practice with individual people where we can see the goodness of every human? And that nobody alive today created any of these systems, and we're all taking responsibility that we actually have to change them. So that's where innovation is a really critical piece of our work.
Thank you for that. How inspiring. Shaunda, the work that you, BGV, I want to get the right, is doing, kind of is a little bit different than these three other models. Share a little bit about the innovation in your work and again, how you're pushing kind of against traditional standard philanthropy.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just going back to at the top of the call, just explaining like our signature programming, where we're really honestly showing up for our own communities, to be honest. This is like with the data reports that it's less than 1%, but it's actually 0.027% of Black and Brown women entrepreneurs actually get access to financial capital. So with the model that we've created at BGV, it involves civic engagement and activating the community. The community is like at the base in one of our three pillars. And with the community, it creates that social and financial capital for Black and Brown women founders that didn't have access to it at all. To be honest, being part of this community and really having my eyes open from coming from corporate America and being an entrepreneur being able to find a solution in the marketplace, but having the funding coming from a corporation that I work for, to now like seeing hundreds of stories of like, oh, I was denied for that application because the criteria just automatically discounted me. It's just like, this is why BGV is here. And I think the ways that we're pushing the boundaries on innovation is through our programming. So we have like concepted this, we are your friends and family round, but it goes beyond the financial capital. It's like, let's talk about the social capital component. Like, so with our BGV signature program, with our pitch competition, we've adapted that over the years to really look, how do we go deeper in cities? And we believe in the one-to-one, many-to-many model, where it's just like, let's give you the blueprint to go deeper in your city. We just launched a programming that is a 9-month fellowship program where we're taking business owners to business leaders for their local ecosystem so they can deepen that impact of providing other women entrepreneurs with social and financial capital. So all in all, with this innovation thinking, we're creating programming that can stretch across all age groups with Black and Brown women founders, but also to all industry verticals. So even in COVID, we had to take a huge pivot of like, how do we continue to serve and innovate? And we took our local pitch competitions to virtual, but we found gold tackling industry verticals. So now it's like, we can serve way more women focusing on these industry verticals and widening, like, oh, now we're national and we can do a call out to all Black and Brown women entrepreneurs in specific industry verticals. So it's just like, it's the pivot. It's the pivot. When you're throwing a curveball, you got to pivot. So with the pandemic, it showed us like we can show up for our community in a deeper way and a more strategic way. So with all that being said, it's just like, with the programming that we have and the community that we're building, we're not your traditional like pitch competitions, VC, where it's just like, oh, here's your funding. No, we provide curriculum after their pitch competitions. We provide a community where they can come and get peer-to-peer resource sharing with each other. So it's just like that community element is like, bring everyone into this circle. And that's what we want to first cultivate nationally, but globally too, for Black and brown women identifying founders. So with this model, we're figuring that this is going to help generations to come. Like, I am so excited to see even my personal friends sign up for Black Girl Ventures and hear their success stories, and being able to say, like, even amongst the pandemic, we've been able to serve or fund over 130 women and create jobs too for our community. So it's like a ripple effect. So so with our innovation, it's like ever evolving and ever growing, but it's all about community. And that's what I'm seeing, and pushing past that financial piece. Because I know we're talking about giving circles, but like, what does social capital look like? And I know we're going to get to that later, but I think with BGV, it's just like that social component, in-kind resources, partnering with different organizations to go deeper, and really evaluating the life cycle of an entrepreneur, and really being particular about the resources that we're giving them so they can scale their businesses, so we can have a more equitable society. That's what we dream of. Like, it should be a standard that Black and brown women entrepreneurs get this funding, but it's not. So we're going to normalize it and we're going to push for it. But that is how Philanthropy does take an important position and is directly aligned with our mission, but it's helping us change to the next level for those that have not been able to have a seat at the table, quite honestly. And I know we say a seat at the table a lot, but it's like, what is the table? The table's big now, so all of us can have a seat at it. Let's create a new normal. And that's what we're trying to do with innovation and programming at BGV, so we can serve more founders, so they can scale their visions.
Yeah, meeting the people we want to assist where they are, and not making them have to jump through hoops to find it. So one of the common threads that I'm hearing in these responses in terms of innovation is this idea of, education and programming kind of being key to the work that you're doing. Colleen, share a little bit more about how the Battery Giving Circle kind of evolved and was created, and what's different about how you are doing things that kind of push against the norm.
Yeah, and this kind of goes to one of the questions that I saw pop up in the chat too, is that Battery Powered's about 7 years old now, and it was developed from a very strategic process. It was developed over a year of, working with philanthropy consultants and the founders and members of the club to kind of design this giving circle. So it came from it wasn't spontaneous. It was a very strategic development process. It has evolved spontaneously since then, as times have changed, as we have learned more, and as we take more and more member input. And we've, frankly, gotten only better and better as we continue to respond to what our members are interested in. So the piece that I wanted to focus on, and this ties into the education, which you asked about, Jeannie, and that I mentioned in my introduction, is an area that we are, I guess, innovating in. But I wouldn't say we've cracked the nut on it. But it's one of the areas that I'm most passionate about, and so that's what I want to talk about. The idea that people with different ideological and political leanings can give collectively and effectively together. We're a big giving circle. We are not an ideologically homogeneous group of people, though. I mean, we are in San Francisco, so we have a lot of progressive bent, as you all know, the Bay Area, but we have very conservative members as well. And what we have found is that we might not all agree on specific strategies, but we almost always agree on a high level goal. And so how can we focus on what unites us more than what divides us? And I'll just give one example of this. And again, it's a work in progress. We don't always get it right. We took on a theme on gun violence prevention. And you know the hot button issues there. What we realized was absolutely everybody agreed that they wanted to reduce gun death and injury in our country, that it was unnecessarily high. Not everybody agreed that any policies should change. But what we ended up doing was, because of our member diversity, it forced us to look further and find more solutions to this challenge than just policy. So we ended up funding policy change because it is a very important tool, but it's not the only tool. We also ended up funding programs around suicide prevention, which is actually the #1. That's the largest part of gun deaths in our country. It's about 60% of the gun deaths in our country. And we also ended up investing in programs that invested in individuals who've been caught up in a cycle of violence and needed support to get out of that so that they weren't perpetuating gun violence in the future. So we ended up funding a very diverse group of strategies, and not everybody agreed with every strategy, but all of them were highly effective and they all went towards a common goal. And so that's how we did $1.3 million in grants on a very sensitive issue with a quite diverse group. And I guess my bottom line is that I feel collective philanthropy really can be a bridge builder in this time of extreme polarization.
What a powerful example. And in terms of what we talk about in terms of the democratization that can happen in a giving circle, and the enlightenment, right, that can happen across ideologically different points of view on a very important issue. And collectively, being able to fund many different pathways to trying to solve a very complex issue. So
I would say the one downside is that takes time, right? We needed that 4 months. We needed to be able to do the deep research, and we needed to be able to bring people along. And so our model was, did help us in that goal. Yeah.
So I'm monitoring the time, and I knew that this was going to go fast. So I'm going to jump around to some of our questions so that we can get to the Q&A from audience. But one of the ones that I want to touch upon, because I think all of your organizations have something to say about this. So we know from research at WPI that women and communities of color in particular are drawn to a more expanded definition of philanthropy that really includes all of the resources that one can give back. So so I'll start with Shaunda, because she was going down this path with us. Let's go beyond the dollar, and let's talk about how your giving circle or your model is really identifying ways to engage members so they can embrace and use all of their resources, their time, talent, testimony, and ties, as Lynetta Gilbert was encouraging us, beyond just treasure. So Shaunda, let's start with you, and then we'll go around the room.
Yeah, so going back to like, just how do we support entrepreneurs beyond like that financial capital giving piece? And how do we keep them activated so they can scale their businesses? One thing that BGV does is we provide them a curriculum to really educate them as entrepreneurs on the 5 pillars of business, like HR, IT, marketing, finance, and legal, to really take their businesses to the next level. And by providing them with that curriculum, we're enabling them to know, like, okay, so I have $10,000. What do I do with it? Do I put it to marketing, or what's best for my organization? How can I scale it? So they don't do this alone. We have something called BGV Connect, which is like our online incubator, where we have 700 plus Black and brown women entrepreneurs that span globally, and they resource share all the time. They span across different age groups, across different industry verticals, i.e.
Can you explain? That question came through. What is an industry vertical?
So industry vertical, nonprofits, an industry vertical, fashion's an industry vertical. So it's where does your business lie in the marketplace? So we do look at, like, tech is a big industry vertical, but there's intersectionality between industry verticals that our Black and brown women entrepreneurs are activated in. So we have a lot of fintech Black and brown women entrepreneurs in our portfolio. So one way we are really, really honing in on that community aspect and really giving beyond the financial piece is the activation of our BGV Connect group. And pivoting, again, going back to the pivot of COVID, we developed co-working for them. Every Wednesday from 9 to 5, it's a co-working space on Zoom where they can show up as their whole selves and ask questions to scale their businesses. So it's a lot of peer-to-peer mentor resourcing, sharing. And beyond that, we do have our BGV alumni that come through the pitch competition. They get exposure to our partners, and a lot of our partners are even non-monetary. So they're like, how can we provide office hours for your community? Like, so they're showing up in waves and different ways to activate our community.
There's a question that came through in particular for you, Shaunda, with how to participate financially. There is an opportunity to donate, but is there also the opportunity to actually invest in the startups?
Absolutely. So that's great. And I just want to go back to Colleen's point. We've seen like people from different races, backgrounds show up for our community amidst COVID. And I think that's one thing to point out. But yes, you can donate, but also you can reach out to me, my team, and we can definitely have a bigger discussion as to how you can invest in our portfolio. We do have over 300 Black and Brown women entrepreneurs in our portfolios, and we do have partners saying like, okay, how can we get in? How can we invest? And we can make that connection definitely happen. But we have different ways of activating the community, from volunteer opportunities to funding opportunities, so we can keep scaling with our operations.
Great, Shaunda, thank you so much. Minda, I want to give you a chance to weigh in on this. As you started out by talking about how the 1K Project was a volunteer collective and coming together. So how are members engaging in all the different ways?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different ways that I think about going sort of beyond the dollar. And as I think about it, there are sort of two ways. One is the really powerful connection on direct giving. And I think that I've seen it be transformative for people's perspectives. For example, when a sponsor is able to give a substantial amount, it changes someone's situation. And they don't know that person. They know their story, but they just know it's Katie with 4 kids in Virginia. They really don't know, and they know her story, but they don't know who she is specifically. And they feel empowered. With a $3,000 donation, they feel much more powerful than those actual dollars, because the depth and power of that impact. And then when they get a thank you note back, often it is just extremely powerful to know just how much can be done with that amount of money. And so that personal connection to the impact is transformative. And so we've seen our sponsors go out and recruit other sponsors. We've seen our sponsors go out and gift this as a Christmas gift to their team, of choosing families to support and doing this. So it is an empowering thing. And then that gets to the second part of what I think is really exciting about what we're doing, which is that we really see this as a network rather than a centrally managed. We as a central group set the protocols and rules, but it's the network that we activate that is the real power. And so the people in the network, as they become part of our trusted network, we know who they are, we know their position in the community and who they can refer. That's empowering too. So every time we talk to a business owner, we're empowering them to refer people to apply. We're empowering them to find the next business owner who can do the same thing, expand the network. We talk to a journalist and we can say, now you're part of our trusted network, you can refer families to us. And that sort of is jarring to them in a way, because what it is that we've decentralized philanthropy. We've said that everyone can play a role in monetary and non-monetary. We also created a lower giving level than 3,000 where people could collectively give to one family. So we created ways for multiple kinds of increments. And we also really emphasized at every turn what it meant to grow this network of trust. And we did a lot on the systems end to maintain the identifying information about who we let refer in and how everyone was all interconnected. So we had sort of a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon situation going on. But on a much broader scale, I think that everyone who participated, it kind of was this empowering realization of what they could do as an individual. And to me, that was really exciting to see the lights go on over and over and over again.
Yeah, the accessibility, the idea of allowing people to meeting them where they are and making it really easy for them to engage. And then being able to create, given your talents in that space, making it scalable. I just think that's just absolutely fascinating. It's amazing what you've been able to do in such a short time.
And I'm hoping that the idea of that scalability is something that we can transport to other people with other purposes. And I think that might end up being the legacy, because hopefully there are systemic things coming to sort of the aid of people during the pandemic. I think that, finally, large nonprofits and governments have been able to infiltrate some of the family situations. I think it's still a pretty desperate need in some places. I think that there will always be other issues that people are really passionate about and want to build networks for.
Right.
And I think paving the way for something like that is really exciting.
Yeah. Shan, how about you? What are you guys have been doing this in so many different communities even. How are you allowing members to really truly invest all of their resources into this work?
Yeah, I love this question. Thanks for lifting it up. And I really just wanted to piggyback on what Minda was saying and what you were lifting up around meeting people where they are. And I think so much of what the Giving Project offers is like a container for people to engage at like a much deeper level across race and class. And so even to what Colleen was saying about kind of working across ideology, kind of ideological differences, I think with ours, I would say generally we're attracting people who would be more to like center left kind of politically, ideologically, but even within that, there's so many barriers to communication and barriers to going deeply around how we've been socialized and developed by race, by class, gender, all these different all the intersections around how oppression has operated for us and how we've internalized it, how we act that out with each other. So I think this piece around social capital is so critical, because one of the most significant outcomes of Giving Projects, other than the money, so I think we typically raise Giving Project, which is usually about 20 people, usually is raising anywhere between $100,000 to $400,000, so $100,000 to $400,000 in about 6 months, and moving that. But one of the significant other outcomes beyond the money is developing people who have the skill set, the commitment to be able to, and the relationships to be able to mobilize resources to social justice movements in particular. And so relationships are really key. And one of the things in our model that's really, that I really love is that people are encouraged not to do kind of crowdfunding or Facebook or social media fundraising. They're really encouraged to have that conversation with your uncle or have that conversation with your neighbor and do it through a one-on-one conversation where you're really sharing, this is why this is meaningful to me. This is why I'm giving from my own pocket, my own meaningful gift into this effort. And this is why I'm inviting you to be in relationship with me in this project. And those conversations are so transformative for people, where it's like, kind of breaking down those divides. And sometimes, we encourage people to go after people in their family that they, where it's hard. And sometimes it's not necessarily, this isn't the right time to have that hardest conversation for this thing. But sometimes even, to really be able to share, this is what's meaningful. And this is what I care deeply about to people that are closest to us, can be just like really transformative experience for people. And then to have people reciprocate and be, want to support them in that, want to learn more about why they're interested in that, learn more about the projects that they're going to fund, learn more about the movements that they're part of. So that's one piece, is the kind of those relationships and just those really close, intimate, personal relationships. And the other part around social capital is kind of the building kind of progressive infrastructure. And so all Giving Projects are housed at organizations, at social justice funds and foundations that also run other programming, that also do other grant making. A lot of them have COVID response funds or have Black-led organizing funds that do a lot of donor education and other kind of work in the community. And so the Giving Project is kind of this critical program that helps build the capacity of those organizations to do their work in a more politically aligned and politically clear way. And I think that within that is like understanding kind of where the base of the economy is capitalist, right? Like is about capitalist production. It is about, the dispossession of land, the privatization of resources. There's also kind of the structures in society built on top of that reinforce that system. And there's certain logics that encourage that. And one of those things is scarcity, where it's like, well, we'll just tear down all these trees, or we'll just extract all the resources because it's finite and we just need to use it all up. And that kind of mentality, I think, also trickles into our mindset around fundraising, where we just want to just get as much as we can right now. And what we're trying to do is kind of slow down and build kind of a deeper foundation that's really built on accountability, reciprocity, democracy, that kind of collective piece. And that takes time. And that doesn't happen after 6 months, but we're kind of planting the seed where people can kind of continue that practice in all of their work after the Giving Project is done.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shan. So I'm monitoring the time, and I knew that this was going to happen. We're running quickly out, but we're going to wrap up real quickly. I want to give each of you an opportunity to provide just a quick takeaway for our audience. And so I'm going to start with Colleen, not to put you on the spot, and then we'll move real quickly through the group. Colleen, any last minute takeaways?
Yeah, well, I'll give everybody who's listening something super concrete. We spend a lot of time developing each of our themes, vetting the organizations, and those resources are totally publicly available. So I'm going to pop into the chat a link. If you are working on an issue and you want to use any of our resources, it's completely open source. And please, that link will take you right to every theme that we've ever covered, and feel free to steal and borrow and build on top of any of that.
Love that. Minda?
Yeah, I think that for me, what really I came away with, and I think a lot of our organization came away with, is the power of individuals to move fast, like little speedboats. Together we may be like the Queen Mary that can go across the ocean, but it takes a long time to move and to turn. But individuals are like speedboats, and they can go so fast and do so much really quickly. And sometimes that's the best response to an issue. And I think that we embraced that. We tried to harness the power of individuals to work together, and understood that, we weren't trying to become a nonprofit. We were not trying to be anything other than a group that organized a network. And I think once we really saw ourselves in that light, it was extremely empowering. And we tried to distribute that power out to the group. And that's something that I always will take away from the experience of doing this, because we built it as we went. Again, that speed also meant that from the very beginning, we could be effective. And we focused on doing that rather than stepping back and taking a month to build something, because there was no time for that. We just needed to fund families, and we needed to do it in whatever way we could while we were figuring out what the right way was to do it. And I think that's the excitement of being an individual. When you're part of a nonprofit, you have fiduciary responsibilities. There are more structural and bureaucratic things that are well-intentioned and good for lots of things. But when you step out of that framework, you can do so much so quickly. And I think that was a big part of the energy of the project.
Thanks, Minda. Shaunda, real fast.
So one thing I will say is this group has been amazing. And I think attendees, I hope you take what bits and pieces and gems that you can from here and be inspired. That is the baseline. Be inspired to deepen the impact. I love the meanings and connections. I love like all the quotes that were dropped here, but I think it starts with us and finding what is your why? What is your why, and how do you want to create it? We all have different models, but you can adapt it. I love that Colleen shared these resources, but I think we're breaking down the barriers of like nonprofit versus nonprofit. It's like, no, we're here collectively to move change. So how do you want to show up in the world tomorrow? And I just want to leave that with everybody.
Shaunda, thank you. And Shan, last words.
Yeah, I'll just co-sign what Shaunda just said. And this has been such a great conversation, just such different models and such different contexts that everybody's working in. But I feel like I'm seeing these themes around We need to do things differently. We need to experiment. We have the power to actually try different things. We can adapt these models, and that we can cooperate. We can learn from each other, and we can do that pretty quickly. Like, and I think that that's what's so exciting about all of these models that we've been talking about. And I think the ultimate goal is for all of us, for all people in the world, for all working people, to be empowered and to be protagonists in our own lives, and to be able to really have that power and that leadership. And I'll just drop in the chat too. We have an event coming up if folks are interested in learning more about giving projects later this month. So check us out. But it's been a really great conversation. Thank you all, and thank you, Jeanine, for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you again to all of you for joining us. And for those of you who might have joined late, a reminder that this was recorded and can be accessed later. Our We Give Summit team is going to drop a survey in the chat also. So please, please, please provide feedback. And then again, thank you to this wonderful panel of innovative, thoughtful trailblazers. Your collective moral imagination inspires all of us. And is making an impact on our world. We were all move forward tomorrow to activate generosity, to think about change, not charity, to be inspired. And Shaunda, I'm going to think about how do I want to show up in the world tomorrow, being enriched by the conversation that we've had today. So thanks to everyone, and we'll see you at the next session.